at the Barclays Center NBA Draft.
The Atlanta Hawks added Zaccharie Risacher to the mix with the #1 overall pick.
The Grizzlies selected Zach Edey.
The Timberwolves trade up to number 8 in the draft to take a consensus top 10 player.
General Manager Will Dawkins is cooking like Gordon Ramsay after adding 3 impact prospects.
OG Anunoby's the Knick for the next 4 seasons.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
I'm Peter Bukowski. The Big 6 in 60 is brought to you by our friends at Game Time Last Minute Tickets, the lowest price guarantee. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Today, we get the local insights from the top stories in sports, including the Knicks and Heat spending big money before draft night. But we start with the biggest story of the day. The Atlanta Hawks selected French forward Zaccharie Risacher with the #1 pick in last night's NBA draft, the second straight player out of France taken with the top pick in the draft. Risacher and Victor Wembanyama last year make 2 straight top picks, not out of D1 schools, the first time that has happened since LeBron James and Dwight Howard in 2003 and 2004. Locked On Hawks host Brad Rowland went over why Atlanta went with Risacher at #1.
It was relatively quiet on the intel front on the day of the draft on this Wednesday. Every single public report that I saw kind of centered to some degree on Zaccharie Risacher as the likely pick of the Hawks, but nothing was definitive at any point in time. Shams Charania and Adrian Wojnarowski both said in the half hour before the draft actually happened that he was kind of leaning to be the #1 overall pick. Then Woj tossed out Reed Sheppard as a player in real consideration late in the game. And I don't know how real that was, to be honest. Taking him behind the curtain a little bit here on the podcast, I had someone who knows things, I would say, tell me something on Wednesday morning that Reed Sheppard was kind of in the mix for the Hawks. And honestly, I didn't know what to make of that, to the point where it was not reportable by any means for me. But I took note of it at least. I was not, as shocked as everybody else because I had heard that earlier in the day when Woj brought it up. But even when he brought it up, it was very clear that Risacher was kind of in the driver's seat along the way. And when the pick came, the only real drama was where the Hawks were going to take him. It was kind of been reported at that point in time. They drafted him, and then it was like this brief moment. Okay, they've picked Risacher. Is there any chance that they're going to trade this pick down? Because I've covered ad nauseum the last few weeks. There is always a chance of like a conditional trade where you move down. None of that happened. The Hawks were celebrating the pick right away in the green room, or however you want to put that, with regard to where they took this pick. They had Zach Walsh, the longtime equipment guy for the team, who's beloved around this parts in Atlanta. He was actually the one that called the pick in. There was no shenanigans, and they were able to pick the guy they wanted in the end. Now, if you listen to the show regularly, and especially yesterday, I gave a little bit more of my kind of final thoughts. I would not have picked Zaccharie Risacher #1 overall. At the same time, I don't think this is some crazy thought. I saw lots of, as it is wants to happen, I saw a lot of strong reactions on all sides, and I get it. Everybody has their favorite players or their least favorite players, and I totally understand. But something I've been saying for quite some time, really the entire draft cycle, plus especially after the Hawks won the lottery, it was never as clear as people thought it was back in the day when they were kind of focusing on Alex Sarr 6 weeks ago. It was never a situation for me where I was going to have a clear and concise #1 overall pick. As I said yesterday, I ended up with Sarr #1 on my board. If it was me and I had to make a pick, I would have taken Alex Sarr, but the gap was not particularly big. And there is all kinds of positives and negatives on all of these prospects, and that includes Risacher, that includes Sarr, that includes Donovan Clingan. Pick your prospect. They have weaknesses in this class. So if you were coming on hoping I was going to bury this pick, I'm not going to do that. I will give my opinion, as I always do. I don't hold back. It's just I'll give the nuance. I'll give the entire picture. And, polling people that I trust around the league, there were people that don't love this decision, and I understand that as well. I think it's a relatively high floor decision. It's not, in my opinion, a huge upside swing. So if you are in more of the median floor kind of evaluation zone, it looks a little bit better. If you were hoping for a superstar upside player, maybe a little bit less of that, but Anyway, that's kind of the Cliffs Notes at the top of the podcast. What we're going to do the rest of the episode, I will give my kind of scouting report, what you look at with Zaccharie Risacher and what I've been watching with him for weeks and months now. Offense, defense, the whole package. Then later on in the podcast, I'll get into a little bit about what he's going to be making contractually. I will share some quotes, both from Risacher, who spoke to the media, and also Landry Fields with some actual audio from Landry Fields. And then at the end of the podcast, we'll kind of look ahead to day 2 of the draft. And to timestamp things, as I've promised to do that, I'm recording this podcast about 12:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. So if anything changes, you will know when that happened, and I will have a new podcast if there is big news at any point in time. All that said, let's dive in now to what Risacher is, because obviously after all of the intrigue, he is the guy for the Hawks that was drafted at number 1 overall. If you are not familiar, and I know a lot of folks that in my life that are not diehard NBA fans were kind of watching for the first time tonight, kind of like, who is this guy? Asking me questions. I got texts from people that I went to college with, et cetera, that kind of thing. Risacher is a wing, actually born in Spain, but he is French, of course. Just turned 19 in April, very young. Will play most of his rookie season in the NBA at age 19. That's a pretty strong thing. Age is often overstated or understated, but I think that he was a part of a real team in Europe at 18. Not a small factor there. 6'8.5" without shoes, 6'9.5" wingspan, 8'11" standing reach. So really good size, good length. His standing reach is actually higher than a lot of guys who have longer wingspans. So it's not like he has the longest wingspan in the world, but certainly a guy with real small forward size, if nothing else. He played for Borg last season overseas after being an Asvel before that. He didn't play a ton. 23 minutes a game, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 59% true shooting, 22% usage this last season. He was a role player on that team, but again, he was 18 years old. He averaged 17 points a game, per 36 minutes, if you are translating that to like starting level minutes. If you're playing the drinking game that people have told me that they've been playing the last couple of weeks, yes, Risacher is the wing with size who can shoot and defend. One more time, that is the package in a nutshell. He is a big wing with size who can shoot and defend, and every single team in the NBA wants that player. Just ask Mikal Bridges, who just got traded for 5 first-round picks. Obviously, I'm not saying it's Mikal Bridges. That'd be a nice outcome for him, but everybody in the league wants this archetype, and there's a reason why he went number 1 overall. Now, offensively, we'll start there first. It's probably the side of the floor that people kind of care about most, usually with prospects. And the number 1 appeal, as we'll get into and actually hear from Landry Fields later on in this podcast, is his shooting on offense. 39% from 3 this last season on pretty good volume, almost 41% on catch and shoot opportunities. He took a bunch of relocation attempts and shots on the move. He is a good ball mover. What I mean with the ball in his hands and also off the ball. He's a really good cutter. He navigates screens well on offense, etc. He had 2 really hot stretches as a shooter this year, at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, in the middle, kind of a downturn, but the overall package was pretty good. His previous pro seasons were not as good as far as the percentages were concerned. I will say, though, he changed his mechanics before this season. They are much, much cleaner and better now. If you watch tape from him a year and a half ago versus now, it is night and day in a good way for the Hawks. That gives me more confidence that he is actually real in this shooting. But I will say this probably now and again 10 more times. I do think for him to have the outcome that the Hawks are envisioning for him, he's going to need to shoot at a high level. Some guys, it's more of a bonus or whatever. I do think that Zaccharie Risacher is going to have to shoot at a high level for him to be the kind of player the Hawks are hoping that he's going to be. But I think that's probably going to happen, if I had to guess, at this point in time. Especially at this draft slot. And look, you're grading on a curve this year no matter what. People are going to be judging him as the number 1 overall pick. I get that. But I would just kind of not try to forget that, but it's not quite the same as usual. But he's got to make shots, for sure. Now, beyond that, he has good feel for the game. He makes quick decisions. He's not a plotter, which I enjoy. Something that appeals to Quinn Snyder, who likes to make quick decisions. He's not a catch and hold guy the way that some guys are. He's a really good cutter. He knows where to be when he's off the ball, which I like a lot. He is comfortable attacking closeouts on offense, which is something that's going to be huge because in theory, his shooting is his biggest weapon. So when he's proving that, people will kind of fly at him and play off of that a little bit. Being able to take advantage of that by attacking closeouts is very important. He's pretty good in transition, I think. He's not a nuclear athlete, I will say. He's not an explosive, twitchy athlete by NBA standards by any means. I do think that he is fluid. He's a fine athlete, not a great test athlete, like as far as like max vertical, all that stuff. But I think if you watch him play, he moves well. He's kind of slithery, a little bit more fluid than an explosive, but I think it's fine. there are some challenges for him at the rim and beating guys off the dribble. So like what I would say is he's not an on-ball player right now. Doesn't mean he can't ever be one, but he isn't like an above the rim athlete necessarily. He's forced to use his craft a little bit more. He gets bumped off his spot sometimes. He'll lose his balance sometimes. I think that will improve with strength as he gets into an NBA conditioning system. It's a little bit thicker, but I know Synergy had some pretty rough finishing numbers for him in the half court in particular, especially for a guy who's 6'9", 6'10". But I think that he can get a little bit better in the mid-range. But generally speaking, he's an off-ball player for the most part right now who's also kind of rely on that shooting. But the shooting is a very, very important thing. And I know he always says, but you can't have enough shooting, especially from the wings. But I think that's the biggest thing about Risacher's offense, something Landry Field said multiple times, as we'll get into later on. The shooting is a huge part of the appeal with Risacher. And look, he's not dynamic and breaking people down. Like the highlight reel stuff is not going to be there necessarily. But he makes the right play more often than not. He feels the game well, and the shooting and the size and the skill level is all there.
Stay up to date on all things Hawks by subscribing to Locked On Hawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, we'll have more from last night's first round in the NBA draft later in the show, but the Knicks and Heat spent enough money to make some headlines on their own in the hours before teams started picking on Wednesday. We'll give you the details on the deals for OG Anunoby and Bam Adebayo next on the Big Six in 60. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. I mean, keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up a bet anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Right now, 5 teams have odds better than 10-1 to win the World Series. According to FanDuel, the LA Dodgers are the favorites, plus 320. Right behind them, the Yankees and Phillies, each with odds at plus 450. I have that Phillies ticket. I think it's 16-1, maybe longer. But there's the Braves, 9-1, and the Orioles at plus 950. And the Guardians, who currently look like a really, really good team, at 22-1. Hold on. Can I just do that right now? Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60, where our local experts take a deeper dive into the day's biggest stories. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Knicks continued to make headlines Wednesday and re-signed OG Anunoby to a $212 million contract, which will keep him in New York for the next 5 years. New York will have one of the most feared defensive backcourts in the league with Anunoby.
It wasn't necessarily what we dreamed of. We didn't get that $30 or $35 million year number we wanted. Instead, it's $43 million this season, but it is not his max. He could have gotten 5 years, nearly $250 million, and it's just more than any other team in the NBA could give him, and apparently that was a fair deal for both sides.
Yeah, and, the good thing, too, is that, that with the way the salaries work with bird rights and all that, he's going to get 8% raises year over year. So this might actually kind of help them out from the perspective of the luxury tax situation we've been talking about this year, whatever. I've seen numbers that say, like our buddy Jeremy Cohen from Knicks Film School said that it might be, I think, starting at $36 million or something like that, which would be very helpful to the Knicks. Maybe puts them in a situation where if they can doctor up this Mikal Bridges deal and get to the point where they are not hard capped at the first apron, but then they could still retain Isaiah Hartenstein as well. So works out pretty good for both sides. He's going to be making a lot of money by the end. Like, we know that. It's going to be upwards of like $50 million to that final player option. And, given his injury history and everything, maybe a little bit of a tough pill to swallow there 5 years down the line. But who really cares? I mean, right now we're looking at a potential title contender, so I don't really see any downside to this for the Knicks. This is what you had to do. If that was his price, that was his price. And, you just go with it and then go into the season, try to win a championship. And if you do that, nothing matters. Like we said last night, and everything is great. So this is step one towards hopefully getting towards maybe a championship.
I think when the trade was made, the Knicks had a number in mind, and this probably was not the number Leon Rose and Sam Rose talked about over Christmas dinner, right? And then the Knicks went 26-5. I'm not counting Game 7 because OG played 5 minutes. 26-5, including 2 rounds of playoff basketball with Anunoby in the lineup. He is a supercharger to this Knicks team, right? We spent this entire early portion of last season talking about how they were a team that lacked size, lacked physicality, did not have a clear-cut dominant perimeter stopper. All that went away the second they got OG Anunoby. The New York Knicks became the bully. They became, even last season, sans Mikal Bridges, a legitimate NBA championship contender. And if Julius Randle stayed healthy, if Anunoby stayed healthy, who knows? We might be talking about the NBA champions right now. Given that they didn't, we went out, we got Mikal Bridges, and now going forward, you have two of the best defenders in basketball, both on the perimeter. You have an incredible amount of defensive versatility. I think maybe the single biggest thing going forward is the notion that if you lose Isaiah Hartenstein, you have that tertiary rim protection, right? Mikal Bridges, one of the longest wingspans in basketball. OG Anunoby proved himself to be the best shot-blocking small forward in basketball during this NBA playoff run. I think the versatility that those two bring to the table, the at-the-rim leverage they bring at the table is major, and same with the rim pressure Anunoby applies. On the other end, he is just a picture-perfect fit around Jalen Brunson, and if you're the Knicks, you can look in the mirror and say, hey, we have a top-5 player with incredible strengths and very specific weaknesses. We've done everything possible to insulate those weaknesses.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, no matter what, whether you lose Isaiah Hartenstein or you don't, you're going to have a defensive anchor at center, meaning you're going to have 3 plus defensive players. Now, maybe if you end up having to just quote-unquote revert back to Mitchell Robinson, oh, woe is the Knicks, going back to one of the best defensive centers of basketball, one of the best rebounders of basketball, then maybe you're looking at a situation where it's like, oh, well, maybe the offensive viability of some of these lineups takes a hit. But to your point, OG Anunoby is so good with rim protection that, you know, it's like, okay, well, now if you're pushing him into that role and keeping Julius Randle out there for the rebound, so you're not going to lose the rebounding battle, now you have someone else to still guard the other team's best wing in Mikal Bridges, and you have a Josh Hart that you can throw out there for rebounds and for above-average defense. Again, like you said, insulating Jalen Brunson against all possible options and letting him just be the best player that he can be. Ball hawk a little bit, get some steals, do that kind of thing. I think they're in really good shape. And, like, this, again, it's just, if last time was step 1, this is step 2. Step 3, hopefully figure out this luxury tax situation, retain Isaiah Hartenstein, and then maybe the Knicks can just run this back, plus one of the best two-way players in the NBA, one of the most coveted players in the NBA, going into this offseason and make some magic happen. I don't know.
The Knicks are a dream team of role players. These past 3 seasons, there were no 2 players without All-NBA berths to their name that were more coveted than Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby. I mean, we heard about it on the Raptors side of things, the Nets side of things. 4 first-round picks turned down at different points for both those players. They are now both New York Knicks. They are both there to protect Jalen Brunson. They are both there to fly out to the perimeter and close out on shooters. And they are both fantastic three-point shooters. And look, there's still a lot of ways this can go for the New York Knicks. Like, there are questions about that starting lineup and how much shooting they're going to be able to get on the floor if they aren't able to start Dante DiVincenzo, but they can get to lineups that can essentially do everything. The flexibility of this team, the ceiling of this team is just incredibly exciting. And Alex, I think it's fitting. We've been doing this over 5 years now, almost 6 years now, and we went from our initial discussions were, could Kevin Knox be an all-star one day? And now the first time we do this in person, we're talking, hey, this team might legitimately be a championship contender, and no one can say we're being homers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think that we're kind of in a spot now, too, where we're going to get to cover the first team with a legitimate title aspiration, which is pretty exciting as well. So it's exciting for everybody that's ever been a Knicks fan, that's ever covered the Knicks, that's ever dealt with this team. And to be clear, we dealt with them for a number of years. It was not the most fun job in the world trying to find the diamond in the rough amongst Kevin Knox, Frank Ntilikina, Alonzo Trier,
Damian
Dotson, and all these guys. So, yeah, I mean, it's feeling pretty good today.
Stay up to date on all things Knicks by subscribing to Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the same day, Jimmy Butler said he wouldn't sign an extension going to the final year of his contract. The Miami Heat re-signed Bam Adebayo to a 3-year deal worth $166 million, locking in at least part of the Miami core past 2025. As Locked On Heat hosts Wes Goldberg and David Ramil get ready for the live Heat draft party, they took some time to tell us what this deal means for the future in Miami.
You and I have talked about this potential extension for a while. We knew that the Heat were going to offer it to Bam. We didn't think he was actually going to take it because it just, frankly, made more sense wait until next summer, wait 12 months from now,
Right.
and then if you win Defensive Player of the Year, if you're a first team or if you make an All-NBA team, you could be in line for even more money. And I was surprised when I saw the news come down. Were you surprised?
Absolutely. I thought we talked about it. We had Keith Smith, our resident capologist, to offer his speculation on it, and he thought, similarly to what we just said, that he would take that 4th year. Yeah. You see, they're referring to it right now. I don't know if you can hear this in the background here, but it's a pretty large crowd here. Obviously, Eric Bielmani talking about the Bam extension. Yeah, absolutely a surprise. I had no idea that he'd sign it, but good to have it done and no concerns moving forward.
Yeah, who knows if it actually is going to end up being a hometown discount, but again, he could have made another $70 million had he waited and then gotten Defensive Player of the Year or made an All-NBA team. Like I said, 2 very realistic outcomes for him next season. So I'm trying to think, why does he sign the extension? Why now, where technically he can't even sign it now? He can only sign it when the moratorium is lifted. So why is this news being reported on the day of the draft? So can I put my conspiracy hat on for a second?
Absolutely. You've always got it in the back pocket anyway, so might as well go ahead and break it out.
So I think Bam's recruiting. I think Bam's recruiting. I think, look, it made way more sense for him to do it next summer. It doesn't make, like the long-term security thing, I hear it, it doesn't make sense. The guy's 26, he's going to be 27 in a month. He's in his prime. That same money he just agreed to will be there in 12 months. It just will, if not more.
Right.
So why do you do it now, and why is it announced the day of the draft? I think he's recruiting. I think Bam is sick of whatever has been happening. He wants star power. He wants to help the Miami Heat. He's going to the Olympics to compete for Team USA with other superstars in 2 weeks. And I think he wanted this done. I think he wanted it done now because when he's out recruiting superstars, we all know that stars want to play with Bam. Dame wanted to play with Bam. Mikal Bridges wanted to play with Bam, who just got traded to the Knicks. I think this is a message to the rest of the league. Hey, if you want to play with me, you're going to have to do it in Miami because I'm locked up until 2029.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It keeps maybe keeps a little bit more cap room so you can start bringing in another star level player. It's hard to see without everything kind of the bigger picture here, but so far it kind of makes sense for Bam if he wants to keep that space available for him.
So if he is recruiting, what kind of players is he recruiting? Well, I would imagine it's some of the guys at Team USA. That's the other thing too. Why is it happening? Why does this report come out the day of the draft? A few hours after the Mikal Bridges trade went down. I really believe that the Mikal Bridges trade kicked everything. Well, really, I guess the Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso trade kicked everything off. Then the Mikal Bridges was the big one. We've got movement with the Houston Rockets, movement with the Brooklyn Nets, all of these things. And I think, again, this was sort of a flare signal to the rest of the league that I want you to come play with me, and I'm committed long-term to what we're doing in Miami. I don't think it was a coincidence that this report was leaked the day of the draft, hours before a night where we expect a lot of movement to happen, not just with draft picks, but with role players, with star players, even potentially getting moved in the next few hours. And I think if you're a star player and you're looking at where you want to go, knowing that you can go to Miami and Bam Adebayo is going to be there until the end of the decade, I think that helps you. That helps his case. And I don't know who he's looking at specifically. Is he looking at Donovan Mitchell and trying to him into Miami? Is he looking at a guy like Kevin Durant, who has been out there now in rumors? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that Bam Adebayo I strongly believe Bam Adebayo is trying to get other stars to come here.
Don't you see that there's a connection between the announcement and Jimmy's own report regarding that he wants to stay in Miami regardless? Is it kind of sending out a dual message? Jimmy's going to be here. I'm going to be here. You should come join this group so we have a better chance at winning.
I think that could definitely be part of it. Now, the only reason I would say maybe not is because the reason Brian Windhorst said that was he was asked a direct question on the Pat McAfee show, what about Jimmy Butler? Is he going to get traded? And then Windhorst went so far as to say, and that's, I don't know, and look, that kind of, these decisions can be made in a pre-show meeting. Hey, ask me out, Jimmy. I got something I gotta get out there. I got a report that I gotta get out there. But it was a little curious that Windhorst, in all of his other appearances on Get Up and First Take and all those other things today, didn't mention Jimmy Butler again.
Right.
But I do think that is part of it. I think that maybe Jimmy Butler is, at least for right now, saying, hey, I don't want other superstars to worry about me. Let's get the message out there, at least for now, that I'm staying here. I'm good with the contract or without the contract. If you're a star and you want to move teams and you're thinking about Miami, you at least know if I go to Miami, I'm going to play with Bam, I'm going to play with Jimmy, and I'm going to be coached by Spo, and I'm going to have a chance.
Makes a lot of sense. I don't know. It's all kind of playing out in a way that I think a lot of Heat fans aren't too happy with. We're running it back. I think that's a common refrain that I've seen on social media. Do you believe it? Do you believe they're running it back, or do you think that they're still keeping some area open to make some improvements to the roster?
We're going into the run it back mode because we got the report from the Miami Herald today also that the Heat and Haywood Highsmith are there's mutual interest in kind of getting to a contract extension here, or a new contract rather, before free agency opens up. And I don't know what that looks like. Caleb Martin's gone. He's going to opt out. That's a done deal. And unless the Heat are willing to go way into that second luxury tax, probably gone. I don't think that the Heat are going to go into that second tax. But there might be enough room there to figure out a way to keep Haywood, sign whoever you pick at number 15, sign whoever you pick at number 43, a couple of minimum things to round out the roster. And that would be running it back. But I also think, and I'll say this, it's one, like when we're talking about Bam Adebayo, we knew he wasn't going anywhere. Jimmy Butler, we had this whole thing has felt 50-50 every single day. Some days I wake up and I'm like, Jimmy Butler's gone, he's out of here.
Yeah.
Other days I wake up and I'm like, he can't possibly leave, it's Jimmy Butler. So who knows what's going to happen with that. Today's report actually means nothing to me, if I'm being honest.
Why?
I think that he would prefer to stay in Miami no matter what. I do believe that. But I'll believe that he's willing to punt 12 months in the contract when I see it, in other words.
Stay up to date on all things Heat by subscribing to Locked On Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Up next, we'll get back to the biggest picks in the first round of the NBA draft last night. This is the Big 6 in 60 from Locked On. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. This is the Big 6 in 60, a closer look at the 6 biggest stories in sports. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Wizards decided to get active on draft day, trading away one of their young rising stars before picking their next one, hopefully, at number 2 overall. Washington dealt Denny Avdia to the Trailblazers for Malcolm Brogdon and the number 14 pick, giving the team 3 first-round picks. The Wizards used their first on Alex Sarr, and Locked On Wizards host Brandon Scott tells you more about the second pick and the second of 4, a record 4 French players taken in the first round.
A lot of us knew that it was probably going to be the pick at number 2, especially with the reports that Alex Sarr indeed wanted to come to DC, didn't work out for the Atlanta Hawks. Even though they held the cards, even though there was a slim chance they still drafted him, he fell at number 2 to the Washington Wizards. And look, I'm very, very, very happy because this guy, he's 19 years old, 7'1", 220 pounds. He's got rim protecting potential. He's swift on his feet. He can move in transition. I mean, offensively, he has a lot of weapons. Now, they're gonna have to be further developed, but his three-point shot in his mid-range is going to develop and is going to translate, in my opinion. He's very high upside. He definitely wants to play at the power forward position, even though at 7'1", he can't play the 5, but he prefers playing power forward. So, obviously, subject to change, obviously subject to further moves, especially if, looking at the Wizards, do they move Kyle Kuzma or do they wait till the deadline? We just acquired Malcolm Brogdon. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So does he start out the gate? We shall see, because if he does, he's going to start at the 5. Obviously, if Kyle Kuzma stays till the deadline, he's going to be the power forward. And, a lot of questions. I mean, obviously, we're definitely going to talk about it. A lot of questions about, what's the lineup's going to look like, who's going to go where. Right now, small forwards wide open because Denny Avila was traded. But we're gonna talk about that. But getting back to Alex Sarr, man, at number 2, it's what I wanted. It was what a lot of people wanted, and I think that he is a really good prospect in number 2 because 7'1", who can, a guy who can move in transition. He can shoot, and I get it. The shot, the 3-point shot, the mid-range shot, him playing with his back to the basket are all areas that he's going to have to get better at. But you see the potential with his 3-point shot. You see the potential with his mid-range. You see the potential with his ability to attack the basket. He's a rim protector. He's a guy who's going to be a big asset in defending the paint. He's going to be a good help defender. He's definitely going to be a guy that's going to help with defense overall. And look at a lot of areas that we need help. Rebounding, interior defense, interior offense. He's going to help with all 3 areas. And once he polishes his offensive game, this is going to be a scary team, especially when you add him to Bilal Coulibaly. Because right now it's looking like it is going to be Bilal's team. Because Kyle Kuzma's name has been named or as a potential trade partner with the Boston Celtics. And we might very well get the 30th pick. Now, it's just rumors right now. And then Corey Kispert has been named as he's getting trade interest around the league right now. So it looks more and more that it's going to be Bilal Coulibaly's team. And it was said early on, especially within the last couple of months, that he was the one commodity on this roster that was untouchable. So I'm not very surprised and that they're handing the keys over to him as far as being that guy that they're going to build upon. Because look, we're going into year 2 for rebuilding. And realistically, we're probably looking at 2-3 more years of rebuilding till we start adding those certain pieces for a team to make a playoff run. We're looking at probably 2 or 3 more years of rebuilding, and he fits the timeline. He needs to be developed. But look, as we all know, with a revamped scouting department, with Brian Keefe and David Vanderpool leading this coaching staff, who excel in development. If you look at the front office, which Will Dawkins did his thing. Now, I'm going to talk about it. I'm not happy with the Denny trade, but overall, Will Dawkins showed why, that is, there's adults in the building now. Gone are the days of Ernie Grunfeld and Tommy Shepard. This draft was a good draft. And, a lot of people were down on this draft, but this is a developmental draft, which fits what the Wizards are trying to do. We got 3 good players, and it all starts with Alex Sarr. This kid can flat out play. And like I said, once he figures it all out, once we properly develop him, he is going to be an all-star, in my opinion. Now, I firmly believe in that. And the same thing with Bilal. I love the upside of Bilal. So Alex Sarr, really, really good move. And like I said, I'm going to grade all the picks at the end and what I think about the draft overall. So, but before we do, I'll get into the next move, which is Denny Avila was traded before the draft started. And this is from Josh Robbins. Shout out to Josh Robbins. Big fan. Definitely, if you don't follow him on X, and if you're not a subscriber to The Athletic, I definitely recommend it. And he said, quote unquote, in the deal that will send Denny Avila to Portland, the second round picks the Wizards will receive will be in 2028 and 2030. So currently they're in middle school. Washington also will get tonight's 14th pick, which ended up being Bob Carrington. And as reported elsewhere, the second most favorable of Portland's 2029 first round picks. So in hindsight, we got 2 first round picks and 2 second round picks. Now, real quick, how do I feel about that? I mean, easy, man. I'm not happy. And the reason for that is, and I said this, I made it known that Denny was a tradable asset. I'm not saying he wasn't. He was definitely a tradable asset. And the same thing, Corey Kispert, the organization made it known that the only untradeable, the only untouchable was Bilal Coulibaly. So I'm not shocked by the move, but for him to get traded before veterans like Kyle Kuzma or Landry Shamet is what surprises me because, I get it. He had value. I get it that you could flip it. And I had no problem with what we got in return. We got draft picks. Malcolm Brogdon is definitely a guy that we're probably going to move at the deadline. He's obviously not a long-term piece. He's definitely going to provide leadership. I'm a big fan of Malcolm Brogdon. Injuries have been an issue, but again, he's not a long-term piece. But for a guy at 23 years old who he is homegrown, you drafted him, you developed him, you watch him break out, you sign him to an extension, and you turn around and move him. It is questionable to me. Not because you moved him, but because you moved him in front of Kyle Kuzma. I mean, because the biggest argument that I saw with not moving Kyle Kuzma was having a team-friendly deal. Look at Denny's deal. I mean, it was much more team-friendly than Kyle Kuzma's deal. So it to me is very questionable to move him before you would move Kyle Kuzma. And Kyle Kuzma, he's got reflexes like Muhammad Ali. I don't know how he manages to get out, get traded for a couple years now, even go, I don't understand. And like I said, I made it known I like Kyle Kuzma, and in an era where you have to constantly tell people that you like people because people think that if you criticize their basketball game, you dislike them, which is untrue. I like Kyle Kuzma as a player. I like him as a person. And if we were a team that was contending, I wouldn't mind him here. I think he's a good asset. But we are in a rebuild. And I don't, I'm not questioning why they traded Denny Avia. I'm questioning why you decided to retain veterans. And I know what people are going to say. Yes, we can turn around and flip him at the deadline. We said that last year, and then we asked him if he wanted to go, and he's still here. So that's my biggest problem. It's not the fact that we moved Denny Avia, even though I'm a big Denny guy. He's going to do well in Portland. I really question that before you trade a veteran like Kyle Kuzma, before you trade a veteran like Landry Shamet, before you trade a 23-year-old guy who is homegrown, you developed him, you watch him finally break out, you sign him to an extension, and then you ship him out. And I like Bub Carrington. So that's that's my issue with it. I definitely wish all the blessings in the world to Denny Avia. I definitely want to see him excel in Portland until he comes here to play us. I definitely will be at that game, and because he played good ball here, man. And like I said, there was a lot of 50-50 on Twitter, aka X. People that didn't like Denny, the people that do like Denny, they understand. And it's whatever. I mean, if you don't believe that the guy has high upside, it is what it is. But because I just get to the point where I'm not going to argue with people on X anymore. But I think we can all agree that Denny was a nice young player who got better year in, year out, man. Whether you believe he was an all-star potential or whether you believe he was a role player, he was a young player who got better every year. So it is what it is. We'll see with Kyle Kuzma right now. I know the last time I saw, there was a report that there was rumored that Kyle Kuzma, but they were looking at possibly trading him to Boston. I don't know if it was I didn't look at the source yet, so don't quote me on that. But and then there was news that Corey Kispert was also drawing interest in the trade market. So we'll see. We have some time, so you very well could see them moved, and they very well could be around till the deadline. But that's my issue. The move of a 23-year-old in a rebuild before you move a 29-year-old is questionable. All right, we're going to take a look at the next couple of draft picks. Next, Bud Carrington. And I'll say I like this kid, man. I think that Bud Carrington can play some basketball. He is formerly out of Baltimore. He's a local product, man. And, what do I like about him real quick? Now, I'll say this. Yes, I'm not happy with the Denny trade, but I think that once you look at the dynamics of it, it's not a bad move because Bud Carrington is going to be a really good guard in DC, man. A really good guard, in my opinion, because, look, he's 6'5". He slotted to play the point guard position. He could play two guard. I mean, he's a shooter. He's a scorer, man. Averaging 13.8 points. I mean, he shot 41% from the field, 32% from three. I get the numbers don't point out to you. But the cool thing is, and I definitely double check this time, y'all. He is actually the second cousin of Rudy Gay. Again, another guy coming out of B. Moore. So good lineage as far as, having a family memory because Rudy Gay was a really good player, man, stretching back to his days in Memphis and Sacramento. Big fan of Rudy Gay. But, I mean, good things to really look from Bub Carrington, a.k.a. Carlton Carrington. Look, catch and shoot threes. Good form on that, man. Good handles. I mean, he good willing passer. Good advantage creator of pick and rolls and drives. Super fast. So, and this is a team that wants to push the pace. So I love it. This is a team that last year in the second half of the season was number one in pace. So I love the capabilities that we have with him as far as pushing. A fast guard with size. We've been saying this for a while, y'all. We need a guard with size. We got it. We need a guard with size who can move. We got that. So Bub Carrington, man, he's going to do well in DC, in my opinion. Now, what are some things he needs to work on? Poor percentages on pull-up and mid-range jumpers. So definitely, for a guard, you definitely want to see him not only develop a mid-range and a pull-up, but get better in efficiency. Processing information, basketball IQ is kind of mid. Mid-level of basketball IQ. Finishing, he definitely needs to work on his finishing, and defense is an issue. He's not super impactful defensively, so you definitely want to see if Brian Keith and David Vanderpool and whatever coaches they add, because he did. We already covered a couple coaches they added, but definitely need to work on his defensive game, man. But overall, love what I see from Bub Carrington. Really good prospect, man. And like I said, I didn't know if we were going to trade back. That he was probably willing. I did a video on all the prospects, and probably the only one I missed out on was Bub Carrington. And I held back because I didn't know we were going to trade back. Because I knew we weren't going to get him at 26. So good addition. Final addition in the night at number 24. And we actually traded the number 26 pick and the number 51st pick in the second round for the chance to trade for Keyshawn George, my guy, a guy that I predicted would be a good fit around 26, and we grabbed him at 24. And again, all it costed us was the 26th overall pick in the first round and the 51st overall pick in the second round. And let's go ahead and pull him up, man. And like I said, big fan of him also. I wanted him here, and there's a reason for that, because the kid can play basketball out of the University of Miami, aka the U. Looking at him again, 6'8", a 6'8" guard who could probably play forward too. Looking at his shooting percentages, I mean, 42% from the field, 40% from three. Lord, I love what I hear from that. I mean, what can he do? Possesses the skill and the size and the skills to be a versatile swingman with significant potential, man. I mean, fast breaks, he's money. Again, another guy who's going to eat on transition. Good moves, he gets past defenders, man. Good footwork, improving the ball control, reliable passer. But the biggest thing with him is shooting. That is, if you take his strongest skill, is shooting. Proficient in pulling up for shots, catching and shooting. The list goes on, man. He is a really good shooter, and we need shooters, man. So big fan of Keyshawn George. Now, what are the weaknesses? Because where every pro, there's a con. All right, so weaknesses, not the quickest guy. So I know we heard that before with Johnny Davis, but what does Johnny Davis not have? A shot. So not the quickest guy. He definitely compensates with skills and understanding of the game, which basketball IQ is through the roof, in my opinion. So footwork and basketball IQ is going to be a lot of part of his package, man, as far as his success, man, because he doesn't have the speed, kind of like Johnny Davis is going to blow past anybody, but finesse, footwork, and understanding the game are going to be areas where it is really going to help him out with his transition to the NBA. So again, everybody was definitely welcome Alex Sarr with the number 2 overall pick to DC, but also Bub Carrington and Keyshawn George to the Washington Wizards. Definitely. So where do I grade this draft? I'm going to give it an A. I want to give it an A+, but I'm not happy with the Denny trade. And it's not because I don't think we should have traded him, because this was an argument I had all night on X, right? It's not that I'm saying we shouldn't have traded him. And I'm not saying I'm upset with the picks per se, even though, the picks you're looking at, if you want to scout these picks, man, you need to hurry up and go get to the middle school, man. But my problem is this, man, is that you traded a young player before you traded a vet. And now it's like, I mean, at what point do we move on from Kyle Kuzma, man? I mean, what point do we move on from Landry Shamet? And I get it, he's not guaranteed, so you can just move on without having to move him, even though he has, trade value. And the same thing, the list goes on. So that's my only problem. You guys comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. So we're going to get into comments. I know everybody is here to celebrate. I'm giving him an A, man. And the only thing that keeps me from an A+ is that's the Denny trade. Not that I don't think we should have traded him. I just felt like we should have moved some of these vets before you decided to move on from Denny, man.
Stay up to date on all things Wizards by subscribing to Locked On Wizards, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, the Minnesota Timberwolves didn't have a pick until number 27, but they saw a player in the top 10 they couldn't let get away. We'll break down Minnesota's trade up to number 8 next on the Big 6 in 60. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. I mean, keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up a bet anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Right now, 5 teams have odds better than 10-1 to win the World Series. According to FanDuel, the LA Dodgers are the favorites, plus 320. Right behind them, the Yankees and Phillies, each with odds at plus 450. I have that Phillies ticket. I think it's 16-1, maybe longer. But there's the Braves, 9-1, and the Orioles at plus 950. And the Guardians, who currently look like a really, really good team, at 22-1. Hold on. Can I just do that right now? Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. I'm Peter Bukowski. The Timberwolves traded up to the number 8 pick last night, the highest spot any team decided to move up to, and selected Kentucky guard Rob Dillingham. Minnesota gave up their 2031 first-round pick and a 2030 pick swap rights to the Spurs in exchange for the rights to Dillingham. Locked On Wolves host Ben Beacon reacts to Minnesota getting a top 10 pick without giving up any of their roster that just got to the Western Conference Finals.
Nothing until 2030. And nothing on their current roster. And nothing, they didn't trade their 27, which would have been completely understandable. They didn't trade their 37 on Thursday. they traded some stuff that's 7 years down the road because the championship window is open now for a team that went to the conference finals with a 22-year-old superstar. We'll get into a little bit more of that here next, but let's talk about the player they got. Rob Dillingham was a consensus top 10 player. He did slide a bit in some mock drafts. I saw some had him in the late lottery, which was kind of crazy. He didn't do a ton of workouts. There was some ankle injury type stuff, but don't pay attention to any of that. That was all noise because a few weeks ago, there were some people that were mocking him in the top 3, the top 5 in this draft. And number 8, 9, 10, that was kind of where he was most frequently mocked. A lot of people actually liked him to the Spurs, wanted to see him, draft analysts wanted to see him play with Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio. So all that to say, though, the best ball handler in this draft, a dynamic scoring guard. A lot of people see him as a shooting guard in a point guard's body, but I think he's a better passer, or I should say a better table setter is maybe a better way of saying this, a better table setter than he's often given credit for. He had the passing accuracy isn't perfect, but it's everything leading up until the actual pass that is so impressive to me. And we'll get there in a second. I need to start with the scoring. He was over 44% from 3-point range this year in his only year at Kentucky. He averaged 15.2 points per game, 47.5% from the field, 44.4% on threes, on 4.5 3-point attempts per game, 4 assists per game, 3 assists per game this year for Rob Dillingham. He's a really good catch and shoot player too. In fact, catch and shoot threes, 48% this year on 88 attempts. So 88 of his 3-point attempts this year were catch and shoot, and he was nearly 50%, 48%. He was also 38% on off the dribble threes. And actually, he's a good off the dribble shooter from anywhere on the floor. He's a true 3-level scorer. The efficiency at the rim wasn't great. And I saw some scouting reports on YouTube, people saying that he's crafty at the rim. And I heard somebody throw out like a Kyrie finishing at the rim, nowhere near Kyrie level at the rim. Like, let's be clear. But the potential is there because he's got such great touch from everywhere else on the floor. Yes, the jumper, catch and shoot off the dribble threes, but he's great in mid-range. The floater is really impressive. Very rarely do we see guys that are this high as lottery picks that do all this other stuff great, that also have a good floater. The floater's already been developed. He's awesome with change of pace. The two most impressive things for me with him, and obviously the 3-point percentage, but a lot of guys shoot well from 3. That's an important piece, yes. But it's the overall touch on floaters, on the jumper, on some of the craftier finishes he had. He sometimes was just inconsistent at the rim, but what he's able to do. And the other thing is his overall feel. And this goes into the point I made a minute ago. Even if some of the passing stuff, the off-target passing could be an issue at times, like just not hitting people right in the shooting pocket. He's inconsistent as a lob thrower, but he can do it. It's the process that leads to it. It's that feel. Like everybody wanted to talk about, and of course, now, these are guys that were mocked later in the draft. I don't know about like a Tyler Kolek, who, by the way, didn't get drafted at all in the first round and was seen by some as a lottery pick. I'm not going to spend, I don't want to like dunk all over Tyler Kolek for not getting drafted, but I was lower on him than most people. I didn't like him for the Wolves at 27. I had him like as my 5th point guard without even Dillingham in the picture. A lot of people liked him. I like Dillingham. That his feel to me is every bit as good. It's the process. Like, it didn't get all the way to the goal line all the time, but his feel for using change of pace in the right way in the half court or in transition, but especially in the half court, like getting guys on his hip and keeping them there, using the hesitation dribble, just like hesied on guys and just made him fall over, like broke a ton of ankles in college. Reading pick and roll coverages is a rare thing for a one and done point guard. And I mentioned the inconsistent lobs, fine. That can develop. And with NBA bigs catching those lobs, now, well, Rudy Gobert, I know he doesn't have the greatest hands, but he can catch a lob. And, having other NBA bigs, and who knows, maybe it's Josh Minot in a couple of years catching these lobs, or another athletic big catching lobs. But the reading of the pick and roll coverages and handling that is very impressive. The decision-making, do I pass here? Do I attack here? Do I get the defender on my hip and shoot a floater, or, put on the brakes and draw a foul and knock down a 15-footer? He's good in the mid-range. Really, the touch is great everywhere. It really is. And that combined with the way he sees the floor and the decision-making overall, He's just got to finish the process with a more accurate pass more often than not, and he's got to get a little better in the paint. Offensively, he's going to be really good right away. Like really, really good. Like I never want to use the words finished product for a 19 and a half year old one and done college player because he's not a finished product. But like all the stuff that you can't teach, he's got it except for size. Like the floater's there, the touch from three is there, the catch and shoot, the off the dribble, again, the pick and roll feel, the reading the defense, the ability to make the passes is there. Again, it's the completing of the passes and getting more accurate with the passes that's super important. I want to talk about a couple of other things offensively with him, and then defense, which is really my only concern. I'm not super concerned about the the size thing because he's so good with the touch. I'm not super concerned about finishing in the paint.
Stay up to date on all things NBA draft by subscribing to Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Up next, the Grizzlies made Zach Edey a top 10 pick last night and has restarted the debate on if he can make it in the NBA. We'll find out why Memphis thinks Edey is the perfect fit for their franchise on the Big 6 in 60. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. I'm Peter Bukowski. We wrap things up today in Omaha. Zach Edey's game has started NBA debates ever since he broke out onto the national scene at Purdue in 2022. His dominance in college was obvious. But can he make his skills usable in today's NBA game? The Grizzlies decided they'd be the team to find out, taking Edey number 9 overall. Memphis GM Zach Kleiman called him a special fit for the Grizzlies, and Locked On Grizzlies host Michael Cole tells us why Memphis fell in love with the 7-4 two-time Naismith Award winner.
Why Zach Edey? How did it get to this point? And many of you, some people were not too pleased with the pick. Let me start here with myself, because I know that there have been a couple of people who say, "Oh, DeMarco, you haven't talked about Zach Edey as much as Donovan Clingan or Dalton Connett or Khalil Ware and things like that." Let's be clear. I have no problem with the idea of adding Zach Edey on this team. There were guys that I favored over him. Yes, if Dalton Connett was on the board, I felt like that should have been the pick, or Khalil Ware. In quite frankly, in a trade down, Zach Edey made more sense to me. But the Grizzlies had their guy, and look, history will tell you the Grizzlies have no problem. If they have a guy that they want, they will reach for him. You can say what you want about the Jake LaRavia selection or David Roddy selection or whatever the case may be. I specifically remember when the Grizzlies drafted Jake LaRavia, they told us that was the guy all along, and they traded up to get him. And even though it caught some of us as kind of like an out of left field move in the spot that they got. But with all that being said, inside the process here, basically, there were some reports out there about number 6, because if you've been following Locked On Grizzlies, we've talked about the idea that the Grizzlies, if they get Donovan Clingan, the spots 5th and 6th made the most sense. Donovan Clingan was on the board, and then the 5th pick came. Detroit kept its pick and drafted Ron Holland. So when that 6th pick got there, I was all eyes in, just trying to see what would happen, because you knew that there would probably be some conversations between Charlotte and Memphis in that situation. And indeed there were. Multiple reports indicated, I think Yahoo Sports' Jake Fisher first, and then Adrian Wojnarowski at ESPN as well. Basically, Woj came out and said that the Grizzlies did have interest in trading up to number 6. Now, after the draft, Zach Kleiman, basically said that the Grizzlies got their guy. He said that this is exactly how the Grizzlies wanted the draft to play out. Was he saying that just because, he didn't want to slight Edie in any type of way? Probably so a little bit, but I do think that the Grizzlies feel strongly about Edie. Again, he wasn't the top option for me, but at the same time, he wasn't a bad option to me. I was never mad to the point where he was not a good option for the Grizzlies. I think he is a solid option. I've said all along, the Grizzlies do not need a big man who's going to come in and be an all-star. They don't need that. If he becomes that, then great. But that's not what they need. They have those guys. They need someone who's going to fill in the pieces around those core players. And some of the things that Zach Edey does well kind of fits into that process. So, yes, there were some conversations at number 6 overall there. And I think, based on what we gather and based on what you can tell, that probably was to go trade up and get Donovan Clingan. Now, you don't get Clingan. You end up with Zach Edey. And, again, Kleiman, we saw John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., a lot of people in the Grizzlies organization are very happy about this pick. So there is that part of it as well. Like they are thrilled with the idea of adding Zach Edey, no matter what happened at 6 and if they were trying to get Clingan or whatever the case may be. Sometimes things just don't work out, whether it was the price or whatever the case may be. They still ended up getting a big in this range. So then there's another level here to kind of unveil with why the Grizzlies had this interest in Zach Edey and why he was the guy. When Zach Edey, he was a senior, it's a 4-year player. When Zach Edey originally declared for the draft after his junior year, he tested the waters and then decided to come back to Purdue. That was when the Grizzlies kind of really did their homework on him. They were very interested in Zach Edey last year. I mean, this is a guy that they've been, again, interested in for over a year. So they watched them closely this year. And last year, they talked to him. And based on those conversations, Zach Kleiman kind of already got a feel for this guy being a fit, culturally and just, fitting around the team. And then there's other cores, there's other layers to the idea of adding Zach Edey as well. We talked about the fact that the players are pretty much on board with it. The main players that you want to be on board with are your star guys. Desmond Bane sent out a tweet, on X. He sent out a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, and he said, "Let's go," in all caps, indicating how excited he was about the move. Jaren Jackson Jr. posted the little salute emojis as well. And then there's John Morant. John Morant went a little bit step further. Shout out to the fans of Rush Hour out there. Rush Hour 3 had a scene where Chris Tucker, Detective James Carter, walks in a room and he sees this kid, this karate kid that's gigantic, and he looks up at him and it's just like, whoa. John Morant reshared that clip on his Instagram account, and he posted another picture, and that probably went over a lot of people's heads. But he posted a picture of some of his associates taking a photo with Zach Edey at Summer League last year, and there's more to that photo than you know. John Morant's trainer is Trey Draper. It's one of his trainers. Trey Draper was at IMG Academy. Trey Draper is also a Memphis native. He was at IMG Academy all of the years that Zach Edey was there in high school. IMG is where Zach Edey was before he attended Purdue. So there is already a familiarity from one of the main people in Ja's camp to Zach Edey. There's already a direct tie into John Morant there. So look, it sounds like the people in Memphis are excited. I was talking to another person who told me that Memphis is going to love Zach Edey as well. So all things considered, the process, it seems like the Grizzlies did their homework. It's homework that's been done well over a year on the idea of adding Zach Edey to this team.
Stay up to date on all things Grizzlies by subscribing to Locked On Grizzlies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks again to all of our hosts for their expert analysis on the biggest stories of the day. Follow your favorite team's podcast wherever you listen and on YouTube for new episodes every weekday. Tune in again tomorrow for a new hour of the 6 biggest stories in sports. This has been the Big 6 in 60 from the Locked On Podcast Network.